you're off screen.
Well, we slide over there.
There, I got him in more.
Oh. Great. Oh, thank you.
He's right there.
Over here. It's my invisible cloak. All right, everybody, it is 9 o'clock. I'd like to welcome you to the June 17th, 2020 Water and Hydroelectric Operations Committee meeting. And thank you to everybody that's joining us via Zoom. We value and want to hear your opinions and comments. So this is a reminder that to make those comments, you got to use the raise your hand feature on your Zoom web app, or if you're on the phone, please dial *9. This will inform us that you'd like to make a comment. We can unmute you and let you join in on the meeting. So with that, we'll start off with introductions. I'm Jim Close, the Water Operations Manager.
Greg Jones, the Interim General Manager.
Scott Miller, Division 3 Director. Chris Beerwagen, Division 2 Director.
Kean Summers, Hydroelectric Manager.
Matt Wheeler, Hydroelectric Compliance Administrator.
Okay. Thank you. And moving to item 1, the public comment. Do we have any comments that are items that are not on the agenda? No hands raised, so we will move on. Moving to the approval of the minutes for the May 20th, 2020 regular meeting. Any comments, concerns, or questions? None? Good to me. But good. Any public comment on the minutes?
No hands raised.
Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to item number 2, Combie South Powerhouse Operations. And for that, we'll pass it to
Yep.
So, Chris, do we have attendance?
You do have attendance, I was 13.
Running it from there?
We're following you.
Do we, looks like there is Pam out there in the
Okay.
attendees.
Over here.
I need to pull it off the Zoom here, don't I?
No, you're good.
We're looking for a specific attendee on
Oh,
and her name is Pam.
oh, no. I didn't see one. We're not seeing a Pam, other than this Pam. No. Oh, that was his item number 2. I think.
Correct.
Sorry.
Oh, not one. Yeah, this is two. This
Yes.
is, she was the one that,
I don't share in there.
that brought it to my attention.
You should have,
You should have the ability to run it now.
Yep.
It is being recorded and will be posted for information. Yeah. Yeah.
There'll be a point for public comment.
yes,
No,
right.
She's there, people are here, they sit at the table.
Pam, do we know which slide's going out, since they don't agree?
They don't agree.
We're following you.
Okay.
We're the Zoom. We're following you.
Okay, so
Sorry for the technical difficulties, we're getting this
That-
squared away.
yeah. I'm going to assume that the slide that everyone's seeing out there is the Combie South Powerhouse recent changes. So I'd like to kind of start this by giving a high-level overview of the changes that we've made in the operations of Combie South here recently. As you're aware, on May 1st, 2020, the power sales from the Combie South Powerhouse transitioned away from PG&E. Our power purchase agreement with them ended, and we went to a contract with the Northern California Power Agency. The old agreement was much easier for us to work within. The new one is based on real-time market rates for the power grid out there. The real key to this whole discussion is the locational marginal price, the LMP. There are 3 sets of LMPs. There's the day-ahead price, there's the 15-minute price, and then there's the real-time price. So we generally are only working within the day-ahead market. The 15-minute and real-time markets require a whole lot more control over that unit than we have. In addition to the energy sales out there, we're also getting resource adequacy credits and renewable energy credits. So the operational changes are all based on the energy market, though, so we're going to talk about those in detail. So let's talk high level about the energy market and what it's done here recently. This chart on the right-hand side of your screen here is the day-ahead locational marginal price for a hypothetical node in the CalISO system. This this is data that we're working with. What you can see is that power prices are extremely low during the day, and in some cases, they're negative. When you get a negative power price, that means that you are, yes, sir.
So, the attendee that I was asking about may be as Mary Ellen, well, you have a Mary Ellen?
We can't tell while we're screen sharing.
Okay. Well, sounds like she,
That's the slide.
at some point I want to let her express to you the things that are going on the river, so.
Okay.
Right on.
Okay.
Appreciate you bringing this topic to the agenda.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
represents people.
So we have, we are trying to maximize our revenue out there, right? So if we generate during the day, in some cases we're paying to put power on the grid, which does not make sense generally. We're trying to maximize when we hit these peak hours, and what you'll see, this is kind of the pricing reflection of what CalISO refers to the duck curve. So you'll see energy demand during, yes, sir?
So we have been paying to put power on the grid under our purchase agreement or under this new LMP?
Under the new agreement that we're exposed to this market. The previous agreement with PG&E was an older agreement where it was renewables were highly incentivized, and there were different prices that you were paid during the day, but you always made money.
So the challenge is to do that is how much water's in Combie, how much PG&E is already done, when you can run the power plant, kind of
On a daily basis, yep.
Short of a Centennial Reservoir,
Right.
which would allow,
you're right.
That's serious, sure, that would allow some operational,
It would allow significant operational flexibility.
How many hours does Combie hold, for instance? How many hours of operation? I mean, I imagine it goes down pretty fast.
It goes down fairly fast,
Okay.
yeah. And so that's some of what we've been learning over the last month or so as we've played in this new market and tried to optimize our generation out there. So what you can see here is that we try to hit these pricing, the pricing points from about 4 o'clock to the early morning hours. Those are your highest pricing. When the sun comes up, the solar prices, the glut essentially of solar generation on the market drives prices down, and we've seen a fair amount of negative day-ahead prices in the market that we're trying to avoid, so we're not paying to generate. In addition to all that, COVID-19 has kind of turned the energy world on its head. We're seeing demand reductions of 5 to 8% during weekdays, with people not going into their offices, schools closed. All those various things have had dramatic impacts on the energy market, and then we've seen smaller reductions over the weekends, as you might expect. This has resulted in a pretty significant curtailment of renewable energy being put onto the grid. All those intermittent renewables, your solar and your wind, just can't afford to put their power on the grid because they're paying to put power out in a lot of cases as their power purchase agreements expire. So we've seen, what's the number? We've seen 10,632 megawatt hours of self-scheduled curtailments on the grid in the first three full months of the year to date. So that's a pretty significant amount and a real swing in the way the market's operating. CalISO is also having a problem forecasting the load. As this is all new world, they've got some fantastic computer models out there that can go based on previous information and the projected weather, but that none of the rules are applying. So we're seeing massive swings in the energy market. You can see that on, I just picked one example day, so on May 29th, 2020, the real-time prices ranged from negative $527.44 per megawatt hour to $214.82 per megawatt hour. So that is a lot of volatility, meaning if we had been generating into that market, we would have had to pay $527 a megawatt hour to put our power onto the grid.
So the negativity is a nil reimbursement, yet we are operationally expending money?
No, it's not a nil reimbursement. It's you're paying to put power on the grid. It literally, you will get, if you generate into a negative market, the CalISO, and then through our agreement with the NCPA, that money moves behind the scenes. And
new and appreciative.
Yeah.
I'm really glad we're updating this. But yeah, so CalISO gets some funding out of somehow.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's how they pay their bills, right?
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
but the market is incentivizing people not to generate by pricing like that.
So what is an example of how you get into that spot? I'll let you answer the question. Rather than speculate, how do you get into that negative zone?
So we stay away from it, right? So that's the real-time market. Right now, we can't control these units and play in that real-time market. Theoretically, what you would want to do is if you had bid into the day-ahead market that you were going to generate, when your generator saw this signal that the real-time price was negative, you would immediately shut your generator off. So you would not be paid for what you were supposed to generate at the price that you had committed to, but you would make this negative money, you would turn that negative money into a positive by not generating. It's a commodities market that we're playing in at this point. It's supply and demand in a essentially real time. It's a 5-minute market is what they can break it down to, but it's real time that we're.
Somebody physically had to go out there and turn the plant on and off?
Ours we do right now. The bigger units, the Colgates, the PCWA, the Middle Fork, they receive a signal directly from CalISO, and so they can swing things around. I don't foresee us playing in the real-time market at Combie South anytime soon. It's too volatile, and the investment to get us to a point where we could bid into this is substantial.
Dedicated staff and particularly dedicated technology.
Yeah. And so right now we've stayed away from the real-time market, and we're only bidding into this day-ahead market. So our prices are pretty well fixed. Now, if we trip offline or if we overgenerate or undergenerate, we're charged for that at the real-time price, which is why it's important to bid what we think we can generate and then hit that bid dead on, so we don't get penalized by these fluctuations.
Another question is how that plays, the correlation between this and the fact that we have a contract with somebody to buy the power. They still have to go through CalISO.
Yes.
And they still get to.
Once it's on the grid, the CalISO is in control of it, and it gets transported.
Even though we have a contract, but it only goes to that one outfit.
Yeah. You can't really do an electron for electron, right? The power that we generate, there's really no way we can guarantee that power gets to our customer. Yeah, but we put it up on the grid, the CalISO manages the grid, and then makes sure that the demand goes to where it needs to go. So.
And they pay that price.
Yes, they are paying us that price.
Our contract is with the Northern California Power Agency. It just happens to be that they're finding the buyer. It's not like we're directly dealing with Lodi.
Correct.
We're going through, we have a middle person, which is the new exploration.
Yeah.
Technically, and that's why it's not electron for electron. Technically, that's who they find, and then they find us, and they're the middle.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, changing from a fairly static market under PG&E to this market has created some operational challenges, and we have gotten a couple of phone calls about that. And so what I've tried to do is identify the challenges that we've run into, and then the solutions that we've come up with. Yes, sir.
Can we activate our parties so they can describe such a situation?
Well, if you don't,
Did you talk to her?
I've spoken to her about the concerns that she has.
So what was shared to you?
So that there were some pretty dramatic flow changes and some pretty significant impacts to the water surface elevation downstream.
And how far downstream were they?
So my understanding is they were just upstream of the Bear River Bridge, is where they were in the recreating.
Mile. I don't know where they were.
A mile or two downstream. I don't have a river mile. Yeah, downstream.
Okay, so it is fairly close.
Yes.
I was just curious if it was 5 or 7 or 1, and then be impressed at the lack of dissipation, if you would, or I didn't know.
That is one of the things that surprised us a little bit. Is just how little the water dissipates on its way down the stream. So we went out and we put some flow measuring in the river and watched as the changes in operations, the water moved through. And so what we found is that when we go from 0 units online, meaning all of our units are online, to 1 unit online, it's a pretty dramatic change in the river. As we shift from 1 unit to either 2 units or 3 units online, it's a less significant impact. As the river widens out, the water surface elevation change is less significant.
And you're right on, she says 1.25.
Okay.
She just said, we're 1.25 down. She's listening. Oh, yeah, no, I was asked her to come to the committee, but we don't come to the committee.
And so what we have done in order to address that, is identified that we're going to leave a unit online at all times. Unless we see a negative pricing signal that overruns our revenue that we generate from selling the renewable credits, we're going to leave 1 unit online at all times. And so far, we haven't seen a negative pricing signal that significant. So we're going to leave 1 unit on to avoid the dramatic changes in the river.
Fluctuations. And then with the day-ahead bidding, I'm understanding we're gonna stay in that category.
Yes.
Originally, when I ran this by you guys, as you know, got a concerned person, blah, blah, blah. Usually will it typically be, or maybe your predecessor may have said, well, it's gonna be between 4 and 7 in the evening. So by having it, how does the day-ahead bidding, I hear what you're saying. We're gonna try not to let it drop so much by running one on a regular basis. But when we kick in,
So when we kick in
when would it be?
so generally, we're turning the units on at 4 o'clock.
4 p.m.
4 p.m. in the afternoon, yes.
Even on this, keeping one running, you're not keeping it running 24 hours?
We're keeping it running 24/7.
Okay.
And so then, there's 3 units there. So 1 unit we're gonna run 24/7, well, when we have water, and that is the other thing. So we, as of today, the Combie South is offline, there is no water to generate. So.
Bring back a mid-position reservoir such as Centennial, and you could assure the water, yeah.
Yeah.
And this all depends on how much PG&E is running down through walls, right?
It depends on how much, surplus water there is in the system at this point. So Combie South is just a run of the river, meaning if there is water, we generate. So, and when there's not, it's offline, so.
So the one you keep them going is north?
North makes the irrigation demand, so the North Powerhouse is online.
And all that.
Correct, yeah. And so as of today, the Powerhouse is shut down, and when it rains, when PG&E draws down one of their upper lakes, I don't know when it's gonna come back online, but, it'll be a while, is my expectation.
Okay. Now, jumping in here, just
Yep.
because this was the germane reason that I asked this to come on, and again, trying to represent for these folks, is there an access or a website? So it sounds like next couple of weeks, or the last couple of weeks, you'd be cool, retrospectively, because you can't predict the future as well. But how could they, as riverfront recreators, they just literally, they live there, they go paying all the time, I think is what she's saying, and and a couple of neighbors, you know, so there's actually, I think, 2 ladies on the phone right here now. Big question was, well, can we just check it? 'Cause we don't want to drown. You know, we get it, but is there a way to go on and look?
And so there is not,
And will we?
and
Are we thinking of it?
so the problem with that is that it exposes our energy trading strategy, to be honest with you, right? We are playing in the market with people that can play in this real-time market, that can take advantage of these things in they can take advantage of our weaknesses. So if we start publishing our generation schedule,
We're gonna be out for 2 weeks.
and at this point, it's pretty well known that we're gonna be turned off. I'm not too worried about that. But if we start publishing our schedule in a daily and real-time, sort of environment, we have exposed our strategy. And so there are significant downsides to that. So we believe that by changing the operations out there, we've done a reasonable job mitigating that. Unfortunately, we haven't had a whole lot of time to test it, right? As when I spoke with Pam, it was after Memorial Day weekend. We did our testing, we got these numbers, so we really haven't operated under this new criteria for more than maybe a week or so. And in that week or so, the flows had been dropping anyway, and so we weren't able to test a whole lot of information about this.
So then are you assuring me that you'll continue to communicate with this person and/or?
I'd be happy to talk to her about concerns once we.
You left it that we do the committee. Again, I mean, I'm glad to be in the middle, but it's also, if I can make sure you guys are talking, then that's part of the answer too. I hear what you're saying. You gotta keep your cards close to your chest in a poker game.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of what the market is. So you'll follow up with her a little bit?
have spoken to her following your conversation with her.
And we're subordinate of yours, I don't mean to say, we have to have.
No, that's fine, I can, I'd be happy to continue to talk to her as the operations change out there and as we, like I said, I think we've dealt with the significant issues out there. We aren't gonna go from 0 units to 3 anymore. We've eliminated that operation, from our.
That was the maximum fluctuation that
That was
started everybody.
Yep.
So now the range will be
So we'll go from 1 unit to either 2 units or 3 units.
units, not measured, it's a water. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, I think in turbines.
Units running, you're adding more water to the river.
Correct.
So you're increasing the total flow consistently more often. As we ramp up 2 and 3 units, that ramp doesn't go as rapid as
It happens quickly, but it's not as significant in terms of change of water surface elevation. As the river widens out, you don't see the significant swing. That's based on the measurements that we took at the Bear River Bridge, which is where we did our measuring.
But where did you put these?
Yeah.
We're still gonna monitor it. We've only had a week or so of testing this new activity. So as we get better and better at it, maybe we could
We'll continue to.
understanding back to here, and then we can continue the conversation.
Should Pam and Mary know how to raise their hands, *9 or whatever we're doing?
So just one other, let me hit one other point that we've gotten phone calls about, and that's the fluctuation in Lake Combie water surface elevation. In previous years, the elevation has held just rock steady. We've held it there. As we try and add and withdraw water throughout the day, the water surface elevation in Combie has been fluctuating a lot. So what we've done in order to address that is we've identified a firm minimum elevation. We've said you will not go below elevation 1598 for power operations. We've given a specific maximum fluctuation in the water surface elevation over a 24-hour period. So we're not entirely chasing the power market here. We're
talking to the Combie Homeowners Association, or who are you talking to out there?
I've talked to the person that complained, so we have not, we have not,
We've had good relations with the
yeah.
side of the lake, the peninsula, over the years with access, and then
Yeah.
Combie, they were very helpful, through the Dark Horse. I mean, I know this is a blending, but it's this neighborhood, and the docks themselves. They were very much coming forward, and the 50 people, or 50, well, probably felt as when you were the assistant general manager. We had to work through it, grandfathering people in, but they were actually really helpful to work with and appreciated us. So that's the Combie Homeowners Association, if I remember.
We can reach out to them and check in with them. Yeah.
No, literally. Well, you were down there the other day. It's like, Primo and I are still there.
It seems to me, if you already said it, that generally we produce power at night, starting at 4 o'clock, so that's not a strategy we don't want to publish.
No, I mean, that's what the market does.
That to me is a really reasonable alternative or statement that, okay, this is when you can plan on there being water in the river, and go down there in the morning, right?
Generally, if it's going to change, it's going to be in the late afternoon.
Yeah.
So.
Please, them coming home from work. COVID's different, but
Yeah.
in reality, their life is different. Again, just bringing the voice of some individuals, it's not everybody, it's just some people.
No, and the fluctuations were significant, and so we went out, we measured it, and we believe we've mitigated it.
And for the individual, I guess you got trapped against the boulder with the water coming up, and didn't know if it was going to stop, I guess, at some point, kind of freaked everybody out. When they're otherwise pastoral. So, caveating on this, who is then taking over who's managing the docks and all that? I hadn't thought about above the dam, but yeah, above the dam, it's actually all doggone water skiers and people that are on that lake.
The dock encroachment?
All that, yes. Well, we have, encroachment is now a permanent thing, so we originally just got the docks under control, everybody was dropping docks in. We maybe before your time, we hadn't been out there for 30 years. We had minimal access on our own lake, and all private citizens pretty much were taking over the lake in the sense that they lived there. We then came in and had to do this thing with the licensure of a dock to be placed on Combie, back to your levels and these fluctuations. Why And then again, as we started to dredge it, this is the people we were working with. And then, so the dock thing kind of took its trick was grandfather some people in. You know, we've not been there for, this was my logic. We haven't been there 30 years. Let's start from now on. And so that very much worked that people could appeal and variance and da-da-da-da-da. And it's, definitely been Beretta. But as I said, it wasn't in your basket here in the last couple of years, because it's been pretty mellow with the docks. It kind of got established, we got the renewal, the Quagga came in, that put a little other extra thing in it. So I'm not sure who on staff has been managing these things. Literally, you triggered this by this, the levels above.
Monica did a presentation, we talked about it.
We've been updating the dock encroachment permit.
Oh, and I've not been on.
That is where we're at with the dock.
So Monica's
But
in
it's
charge of that?
different. Engineering.
Engineering's in charge of that. As far as the dock
regulations and all that is.
Well, again, that, we have it designed, and then the relationship be easy enough to interface, but maybe some of these old contacts have dropped.
Well, and I can say there's a couple of different topics you mentioned, so the docks and encroachments and whatnot. It's been recreation, it's been Monica. As far as the reservoir operations and elevations, it's always been the water resources superintendent, and that's Tor Larson, that used to be Sue. We reach out to them every year and let them know, here's our scheduling, here's when to expect the lake to go down, please get your boat off by this date. And we still do that every year.
And we even had an ombudsman. Do you remember, older fella?
Yeah, I don't remember his name.
But you remember, and he was the other interface, because you know, 150 people live around that lake, and there was a lot of, we just wanted to communicate well. So I'm just trying to.
I think with Chip's understanding of that, you know, with our water resources superintendent and with the recreation for the docks, we've got a pretty good relationship with those homeowners, and we're reaching out to them. We've had a couple
I would ask on this hydro discussion, to bring it back on, let's reach out to them and just say there are going to be some fluctuations of the lake surface. To mitigate that, you can play the last 2 minutes of your presentation there. You know, I mean, literally, you know what I'm saying? So we're proactively just letting people know, things have changed a little bit, it's all been quiet, they're not pursuing these encroachments, I guess, too aggressively at this point. I don't know what burner it sits on. But here's another, you know, we don't want them hitting the sandbar and everybody in the boat dying, and it's all our folks because they were water skiing, literally. You know. Right? It's only 10-foot lake, it's on bars.
Well, and we're only operating in the top 2 feet, so there shouldn't be sandbar problems. There is the restriction.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are operating in a very small area.
Communicate to the folks through whatever channels we still have.
Fair enough.
And we're operating in a much smaller range in the daily, right? So that's 2 feet over a week, or it's much smaller in a daily.
You know, it's all in medicine, it's always risk management and anticipate and share the risk. That's the thing I tell the nurses, share the risk, don't keep it to yourself. Document it, call your supervisor, let people know, and that's part of the communication, and people just appreciate that, so. Yeah, interesting subject to review all this at this point, wow. And what a nightmare for you. Trying to.
It's been a bumpy month.
Here, let me throw a fourth ball into
Yeah.
your 3-ball jungle. Huh. See ya.
So that concludes my presentation. If there are public
With that,
comments.
we'll open it up for public comments. Do we have anyone with a raised hand? And again, a reminder that if you'd like to speak, press *9 on your phone, or raise the hand on your Zoom app.
Mary Ellen,
Good, there you go. I would hope it is.
Mary Ellen or Pam.
Okay, Mary Ellen, you've been unmuted, you're ready to go.
Thank you. This is Mary Ellen, and I just wanted to warn you guys that we're coming over satellite internet, so we have a 1-second latency with our text or our voice getting to you. So we apologize if we speak over anybody. We want to thank you guys for taking so seriously the call that Pam made to you to let you know our concerns about the fluctuation in the water level. We appreciate that very, very much. Just to give you guys the location of where we are, we're 1¼ miles downstream of Combie in a very narrow canyon area. So any changes to the flow that you make has a tremendous impact on the water level at my property. And one of the things that we've been noticing is that you've been talking a lot about the fact that you have to do the generation of the power during the peak demand period, but that's also the primary time that we're down at the river on weekdays because that is when we're off work. And so that's when we and the people on my property have access to get down to the river. So one of the things that we wanted to ask you, and we do understand why you're generating at the time that you are, and we appreciate that you're keeping one of your generators always going, but can you explain a little bit more about your strategy for when you run all three? Like, do you open up two of them all at once, or are you phasing that so that you bring up two and then there's a lag and then you bring up three? And we're interested in that to know how you're mitigating those changes in water level.
This is Pam. It takes us about 10 to 15 minutes to get out of the canyon, but we don't have the option of climbing out of the canyon because it is a steep canyon. So we have to actually go in the water and swim down to a exit spot along the river there. So we have no choice but to be in the water as we are down at the river. So,
Yeah, so
if there were like a 10-minute delay in between 2 and 3, that would give us the time, you know, to the first one would notify us, oh, the water's going up, and we could, you know, actually get out of there on time before the next one hit.
And so at this point, we do turn both of the units on at generally the same time. There isn't much of a stagger to them. The way the market works is you bid in on an hour, and so we can, and this is, I'll look to you for this sort of thing, that we can stage an operator to sit down there for an hour if we want to stagger the units like that. If we want to miss the peak, it's a financial decision. At this point, I believe we've accommodated this. I'd be very interested in watching this over the next couple of cycles as we generate out there, and I'd be happy to continue to talk to these folks as we move forward. But as of right now, we start them both at the same time.
I'd be interested to know how much time roughly between the units you folks would be interested in to allow you enough time to get out of the river. Are we talking 10, 15 minutes, or are we talking half-hour stagger? There's something there that you can...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 10 or 15 minutes would give us time.
Well, maybe. It's hard for us to know, though, right? We don't know what the impact is per generator that you bring up. So we don't know how much of a river level change there is between them as you're doing that.
It's significantly more than at the Bear River, though,
This
because
is the Bear
it's,
River.
I mean, at the bridge, Bear River Bridge, crossing 49, because where, you know, they keep an eye on the level, only because it goes through a narrow canyon right here.
Yeah. And what is the acceptable level per regulation for the water level to change over time? There must be a number for that.
No, there isn't one.
Oh, okay.
So we'd be interested if you guys are willing to partner with us to invite you to my property to make measurements so we could assess the impact of bringing the generator online here at the property so we could know what the changes would be.
That's what the committee would like. We can work on that. There is a cost to that, obviously, but
Communication link going forward and working with folks and seeing what. I mean,
we can absolutely check in with them
we're talking
and
about, you know, finances, but then we need to have the details, and as you say, you know, is it a 10-minute, you know, what would it be? So if there's can you have a subordinate?
we can absolutely stay in touch with them as we move forward. Like I said, it's going to be probably the fall before we're going to be able to do anything out there again, before we have water.
You hear that aspect of that, ladies?
Yeah.
Yes.
But it sounds like the water level won't be changing much for power generation in the near future.
Yeah, no, there is, in the foreseeable future, there is no water to generate.
So there's going to be a seasonality.
Absolutely.
So there may be a seasonality to all this too, that again, the communication would be good. So it sounds like it's gonna all go, and this was an update that I asked to have brought for this very reason, because you guys had alerted us. So yeah, if we can, work together.
We can stay in touch, yeah, and figure something out.
No reason not to spend some money for my constituents. To answer the first question, if it's cost some staff time, I'll stand accused. I'll ask that we spend a little staff time for safety and.
Perfect.
And for a purpose, a true purpose.
Yeah.
We're gonna be doing this, right? Doesn't sound like we're gonna shut it down, ladies. But
Okay,
Well,
thank
you.
we understand that.
yeah, if we can work with you, that's what I'm advocating. If it costs some staff time to do that and do some measurements, I appreciate the offer. Yeah, we can see what it is, and I don't know when we do it. Again, that would not, I
It's gonna be
rely on
months,
staff.
yeah.
Also, in the fall, when we're really doing this a little bit, this throttling up and down.
When it starts raining, yep.
Yeah, okay, so when the first rains come. It has to do with the restrictions of the,
It has to do with water availability, that
yeah,
just isn't.
I was gonna say, of our ability to divert as well.
What'd you call that?
They don't let us divert all spring, right? When, Chip, with the whole state-wide drought issues and Delta support issues, they've taken the drought from 4 years ago, placed these restrictions on our ability to place our own gates to fill our own reservoirs, and they basically allow us to do it when it's not raining. So if there were some rain, we'd probably be filling, rather than running I'm kind of spinning out the discussion compressed over 6 years here.
Yeah, it's safe to say that this is solely based on the hydrology of any given year. So if we have a lot of rain, we're gonna have a high potential to make power in the manner we have in the last month or two. In a dry year, typically we don't run this way. This is technically a dry year.
Yeah.
The reason we're running this year though is PG&E has some work on their, one of their upper reservoirs, and so they're actively dumping extra water. We're capitalizing on that by making power with it. PG&E is now satisfied that they've caught up with where they need to be in their scheduling of draining their reservoirs, so I highly doubt we'll be making any more power through the rest of the summer. However, I'm hearing that if that option becomes available, we will reach out to these folks and communicate with them and come up with a game plan that seems to work for everybody.
Tricky obligation, it's short-term notice, but, we'll get to see where we're going, so we may want to revisit this with you in the fall, as, you know, mechanically, actually getting out there and doing these things. Does that make sense? Ladies?
yes, thank you very much. And I really, really want to thank you guys for taking this whole situation serious. It was very serious for us.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank
Something
you for
that I
calling.
think would, yeah, something else I think would be very beneficial to us, which you were just sort of describing. We understand the parameter that you don't want to give away your market strategy to your competitors in regard to generating power, but would it be asking too much for us to get some sort of perhaps text or email based notification that indicates when you are in a period when you may choose to generate power? So for example, you've indicated that if PG&E releases more water or if it rains, you might start generating again. But rather than making us guess whether we think it's safe to be down in the river or the water might rise, could you give us a notification that it is a period where you might?
And why don't we take that conversation offline with the two?
Yeah.
Over the course of the summer into the fall and figure out the best technological or notification process that we could have with a discrete number of individuals, if that's possible.
Yeah.
It may or may not be
An email or
possible,
something
but
like that, yeah.
It's a good thought, Mary Ellen, and let's see how that
That would suffice.
brings up.
And or back to you guys being able to access in, whichever direction the information comes through. Yeah, that's kind of what they're saying. Is there a website we can look at?
Yeah,
They
okay.
understand.
Can I ask, I don't have their phone numbers anymore, so maybe Director Miller, if you could get me their contact information
Does
again.
Chris have?
I do not, I think Pam.
Yes, that would be fine.
Or
So-
we can contact Annette.
Could I ask that, yeah, you reach out to me, this is Kean Summers, the hydroelectric manager, and provide me your preferred contact information?
Oh,
You know what, Pam,
sure.
I've still got your email here. Pam Emmett, right?
okay, that'd be great.
And it ends in.
You can share it.
664 is the last digits of the phone number.
Correct.
email me at, and then, well, you get your phone number, and then it says, yeah, your email address. So,
Okay, so you can give me that contact information.
Okay.
Okay.
We just need to be careful with
Thank you for sharing.
adding additional expense and cost.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for the call, I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thanks for calling, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other public comment? Okay. Okay, Sid Brown is the next one. Sid, you're unmuted. Are you there, Sid?
Okay, I hope you can hear me. This will be super quick. It's just, can you hear me?
Gotcha, go ahead.
This is okay, again, the delays. It's just a technical request to please be mindful of one conversation at a time, and those who are far away from the microphone, consider projecting a little bit more. It's very difficult to hear. Keen comes through beautifully, so does Chip. Everybody else is very echoey, so I just technically wanted to say that.
Thank you, Sid. Okay, no further comments. We will then close item 2 and move to item 3, which is revisions to section 9. Thank you, folks. Thank you. So revisions to section 9 and elimination of Schedule 9A of the rules and regulations. Now, for a little brief background for you, the Title 17 of the California Code of Regulations defines that water suppliers shall protect the public water supply from contamination by implementation of a cross-connection control program. The district has always done that through Section 9 of our rules and regulations, which is great. However, that section of our rules and regulations has not been updated since 2007. So it's time for a little brushing up. In an effort to keep current with the Title 17 regs, staff has come up with a proposed revision, and it is there in your packet. I did not do track changes because it's a very holistic change. It involves a lot of modifications. It would have looked like just a blob of red ink everywhere. So instead, I provided you with the old regulations along with the proposed new regulations. The key changes are we have provided definitions. In the backflow industry, there's a lot of terms that people are probably not very familiar with, so the definitions there help the general reader know exactly what we're talking about and provide the background they may need to know what those terms are. We also specify district and customer responsibility. This is specifically required in the Title 17 regulations. So we made an effort to mold our Section 9 to very specifically spell out what each is responsible for, and again, that was for compliance. The next item is to require all new non-residential connections to have an RP backflow device. This is kind of the big ticket item in this wholesale change. Currently, we analyze each non-residential connection individually to determine what kind of backflow device they should need. However, what we're finding is that, let's take for an example a commercial building. They initially sign up for water service from us. They tell us that they're just making widgets and there's no hazardous chemicals on site, and so we allow them to connect with the meter and no backflow device. That's fine. What we run into is a year or two down the road, they go out of business. The next owner comes in and they may have CNC machines with chemicals that are hazardous to the water industry, and we don't know that that change has occurred. So what we are proposing is that all new non-residential connections now be required to install an RP device. This will give us maximum protection of our water system. It will also protect us from those changes that occur within the buildings that we're unaware of. And essentially it just provides the highest level of protection for the community water system. This also includes irrigation meters.
Well, that's my question. I first read this, I go, this is fine on raw water, and then hearing you now, I go, no, this only applies to treated water.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So we have non-residential uses, others that I not thought of.
Yeah, municipal, commercial, irrigation, yes, those are the types of connections we're talking about on this. So that's one of the big ticket items. And then the next bullet there, allow current services to continue unless modifications to the system customer made. So basically, if you're your grandfathered in, unless you change your system or we're notified that you have changed the operations within your building, we will revisit that. As well as the fact that the customer does a customer survey every 5 years, and people tell us what they're utilizing the waters for. We'll review those surveys. If you've changed your usage and there's an increased level of hazard, we may require you to install an RP device. And then last but not least, we're providing a little bit better clarification of when residential services will require a backflow device. We've had a lot of folks try to argue with us that their wells are perfectly healthy, and I'm quite sure they are, but it's a risk that we cannot take to, and in fact, it is required by law that we protect our system from their well. Their well may be perfectly healthy on day one, but, you know, let's just say at day 6, it takes a turn for the worse. So anyway, this will close the door and very, very specifically specify that no, if you have an alternate water source on your parcel, regardless if it's a well or if it's a spring, and it's the healthiest thing on earth, it needs to be separated from our system with a backflow device.
So we've always got double backflow.
We have,
You're using reduced pressure thing now.
yes, so in
Double backflow.
the past, we used to allow a double check valve occasionally on commercial devices. Anymore, we're saying we're going to go for the maximum level of protection, which is an RP device, a reduced pressure device. Basically, what happens is if backflow tries to happen, it opens the dump valve and just releases that water instead of allowing it to go back into our system.
Digital. Okay.
No, it's all just based on pressure, yeah. So, with that, I will open it up to questions.
I have no questions. I'm totally in favor. Sounds good to me.
So thank you for that. I will, one thing I forgot to add is that we're actually taking a more common approach with the proposed regulations. Most water utilities require an RP of non-residential connections to protect themselves. So this is more or less closer to the standard than we were in the past.
Good.
In the industry.
I think it's, makes a lot of sense. It should be able to go on consent, I would think.
Yes. All right, yes, appreciate that. All right.
Non-council policy.
Any public comments on this topic? Give it a second for folks to raise their hand. Okay, hearing and seeing none, we will close item 3 and move to item 4. NIAD Internal Compliance Program 2019 Compliance Risk Assessment Summary Report and Self-Certification. That is a mouthful.
That is, well, that's because we're getting into the fun stuff now, right? We can talk about NERC compliance. So this is, the risk assessment here is in response to the Board of Directors requirement that the district develop an internal compliance program. And so this is our risk assessment portion. I'm going to hand it over to Matt, and he's going to talk you through the details of this particular document.
Thank you. I figured I'd just do a high pass on the content and allow you to ask questions if you've got any, but I believe that the staff report and the attached report pretty well speak for themselves. So as stated, this is a required annual assessment and report by our internal compliance program. NID performed well last year in mitigating the identified risks that were identified in last year's report, especially or notably in recruitment and wildfire management. This year we commissioned a consultant, Grid SME, to perform the analysis, and it focused on 5 major areas. Those areas being people and training, operating environment, infrastructure and technology, the regulatory environment, and the electricity market landscape. And some of the key identifications for risk for this year, the 2020 that we're in, recruitment and retention, training and succession planning were identified, personnel safety and physical conditions of our facilities, such as wildfire risks and extreme heat and cold. Cyber attacks, which we've seen a lot of activity this year, but it was identified, and sure enough, there's a lot of mitigating that needs to happen and is happening today in the world of cybersecurity. FERC dam safety and security requirements that are changing, and then NERC standards that are continually changing. And then on the electricity market, it's power pricing, and the PG&E bankruptcy is still hanging out there as risks that we need to be aware of and be ready to mitigate. So the report proposes mitigations for those identified risks, and our recommendation is that this be advanced, the report and self-certification to the Board of Directors as a receive and file item. With that, I'd like to answer any questions you might have.
My first one was concerning the chart about the, this was an issue that was brought up last year about the, the person not finding it right off. Here it is, about the number of new standards coming online each year. What has been the impact of, how's that affected our ability to do this, and or are we able to track the cost of doing this?
So we have opened a FATR, a project number, so we can track these costs a little bit more carefully. Most of what's going to that is the consulting hours that are tied to it. It's extremely difficult to quantify staff hours when they write an RFP, and so we're struggling with that. I can say this year we were able to absorb the increased standards with the staff that we have.
Staff and the consultant.
With the staff that we have, but we are seeing increased consulting dollars going to this.
And you're satisfied that we're keeping above water, no pun intended. On this.
Well, as you'll see in the next item in our compliance assessment, yes, we are keeping above water, and we're keeping current with our regulatory conditions. But these changes, and last year there were 68 changes to standards, and this year we've got 83 changes going into effect. Some of those are updating of a procedure, new boxes to check, and expiration of old standards. Some of them require studies and major expenditures to do modeling of our facilities to meet new standards. And so it's a myriad of things that we have to address, but we're on top of it with our staff and with our consultant resources.
Initially, we had a not applicable as we were intertwined with PG&E, right, on some of these. So how much of these increases are a manifestation of them going, yeah, you no longer have a waiver? Are we being asked, back in the beginning, it wasn't this, PG&E is that, we're not claiming to be this.
No, yeah. So we have a coordinated functional registration with PG&E to deal with the split requirements. We still have that. We negotiate it regularly. I think there's a change that's going to land on Greg's desk shortly if it hasn't already. And so that is an ongoing requirement. These are new standards that impact us. Some of it impacts PG&E, some of it impacts us, some of it impacts both of us.
So the new ones, we still can divide.
We can still divide, correct.
As a small example.
What's our distinction? There are some and we're not?
Well, we're a generator owner and operator.
Okay.
They're our transmission operator.
Transmission.
And schedule coordinator is with CalISO. And so there are pieces to these standards that touch all of those points. And so we will take our piece, PG&E takes their piece where it's appropriate.
Sure.
But again, we still have to be aware of them and respond.
In the beginning, there was this big debate if they're making everybody do everything. We started going, well, wait a minute, that's actually them. So we spent a lot of staff time in the inception of this a few years ago trying to keep it just defined on who we really are. So that has been ongoing and successful by staff.
Absolutely.
So a lot of initiatives.
As a matter of fact, ongoing and successful, we've got a quarterly meeting that happens every quarter with the NERC assessment team, including GridSpeed, SME, and that involves our IT staff, that involves our hydro staff, compliance officer, it involves them as consultants to this. They're really paying attention to the nuts and bolts. We meet for a 2-3 hour period on a quarterly basis. They give us all the information. In 18 months, this is coming. You got to be prepared for this, and this. Timelines are made. So kudos to Matt and his crew and Hydro to really be on the ball and keeping this compliance thing going, because it's thousands of dollars a day, right? If we're out of compliance on this stuff.
Well, you saw, so there's a quantification of some of the fines that were levied against other generators in the staff report here, and it can be millions of dollars that they can come down on you with. This is not a fine to be messed with. Matt did bring up an interesting topic that jogged my memory a little bit. So you will see in our 2021 budget, when it comes in, a significant modeling effort to respond to some new CAL-ISO requirements that come through via NERC here, and that you'll see $100,000 worth of modeling that's going to have to be done at our units to continue to generate. This is new requirements. Yep. Yep.
See, that's my concern, is going from 2014 to 2020. We're off the chart.
Yeah.
And, you know, in my world, if I have a one new spin or state rate a year to deal with, I'm screaming, right? And I go, this is just outside of my parameters of even thinking and going, okay, where do we stand? I always boil it back down to the budget.
Yep.
And how we have to cover those things, and where do we generate new revenue to cover the new requirements, right?
And, that's what the Affordable Care Act is, what drove me out of private practice.
Yeah.
You didn't know, they tell you later you were out of compliance. I had Lavon, one of my staff, I give her 10% of any incentive and or to try and keep track of it. And you just, leak your ass. It's just all these things, they start over-regulating to drive everybody to, it's cheaper to build a car in a big factory rather than the individual shop. It's hard to be compliant. Yeah. So it's.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear that.
I don't anticipate adding compliance staff, district staff in 2021, but I do expect increased consulting dollars.
Okay.
Yep. So I think did we open it to public comment?
Oh, that's true. We probably need a public comment piece. But again, the recommendation is that we advance it to the board for receive and file, and my recommendation is on consent unless there's a need to have it as a specific discussion item.
I agree. Fine. Okay, very good. Any public comment on this topic? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Close item 4, move to item 5.
All right. That's why I brought Matt. It's, a little. Yep. All right, so this one, though, we're going to give a real brief presentation on. This is, again, our 2019 compliance self-assessment summary report. Here is a requirement of the district's internal compliance program. As dry as this is a significant document for the department and the district as a whole. This is our annual audit. We pay a consultant to come in, check over everything that we're responsible for, check over everything we did, and they did that and determined that we were in compliance. So essentially, this report tells you that the compliance side of the house, Matt and his crew are doing their job, and this is the documentation of that. We'd be happy to dive into any one of these specific requirements if you'd like a detailed review of what it is. Yeah, but it is not the most exciting subject. I think the bottom line here is that we are in compliance, and we're asking the committee to forward this to the board to receive and file, and we'd ask that it go on consent as well. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Looks good to me. We can go over it.
Okay.
Any public comment on this one? Okay, Sid, you're open, unmuted.
Okay, I just have a question regarding the document in the package has confidential written at the bottom, and I'm just a little nervous about that. Is it still?
No, at this point, it is a public document. It is our audit, and we're all right releasing it. So we'll have to check with the consultant about the confidential stamp on the bottom. Yeah.
All right, that's my only concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Sid.
We'll investigate that and revise it before it goes to the board.
Okay, seeing no other public comments, we will close that item. Now we'll transition to item 6.
So I have a presentation I'd like to
You want me to get it up?
grab that. And is, Jim Lynch is on the phone, is that correct?
Yes.
Jim, are you there? Can you hear us?
Sorry, we're pulling up the presentation real quick. Go back to your presentation. We're asking him to unmute.
Okay.
He has to unmute on his line. There he is.
All right, Jim.
I'm on the phone. Can you hear me,
All right,
Ken?
excellent. We can hear you. All right,
Great.
so I'm gonna,
Thanks, Ken.
yeah, thank you for being here. We'll go through a real quick,
Oh, my pleasure.
overview of the staff report here, and then open it to discussion. Just a high-level status of our current application. So on April 15th, 2011, we filed our initial application that was revised in June of 2012. And we're still in an unknown situation as to when our new license is going to be issued. A couple of key milestones are necessary. The biggest outstanding one there is the Section 7 consultation by the Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries Service. We have received a final ruling on the state waiver of the 401 water quality certification. However, there have been appeals filed, and so that process is not fully complete yet. So we'll wait and see how that.
And how do those get? I read that and I go, how do those get? What's the process for resolving those appeals? Do they have to go to court? How does that work?
So it's entirely a FERC process at this point.
Oh, FERC process.
Yeah, the appeals are to FERC. We're not
involved in that.
at this point. I would assume that we would file some paperwork depending on how it moves forward, but it's a FERC decision that's out of our hands. So bottom line is that the license issuance could occur within 12 months. That's speculative at this point, I think, and I'm certainly not saying that it is going to occur in the next 12 months. It is incredibly dynamic at this point, but I think we need to be prepared for that possibility.
So,
Just last week.
Yeah, and I guess just last week PCWA received theirs, so it's
Just
yeah,
gonna bring that
they
up.
are
I was gonna
things
ask-
are breaking loose.
yeah, I was gonna ask Jim about that. As a face in the room over the years, they went out for license a year ahead of us and just got theirs last week at our combined PCWA NID meeting. And I've been trying to remember, we had a difference in philosophy and approach, somewhat recommended by yourself, sir.
Yes,
You remember these? You remember what I'm?
I do.
Yeah, okay, right on. 2011, a decade ago. So, how did that all play out? You know, end of the day, they're all valid strategies. How are we looking, and do you have enough knowledge about the PCWA success to critique it? You know, compare and critique. And you do remember what I'm talking about, right?
I certainly do. Yeah, I would say my recollection is that PCWA's approach to their relicensing was to be very aggressive in terms of agreeing with agencies. Very early on, the agencies wanted a lot of studies. PCWA wanted to get their license as soon as possible. That's what was driving them. So they were very comfortable saying yes on studies and doing a lot of studies and not pushing back too hard, which was quicker for them. They used the same process we did. Both was the integrated licensing process, but they did that. They were much. Pardon me?
I think the other day in the meeting they said it cost them $35 million. 35.
Yep. And I think that doesn't include their staff cost. I think that was their consultant cost. Everyone reports that somewhat differently, and I'd always look at that with a pound of salt, or at least a pound of salt on those. But they also wanted to get to agreement quickly, so they entered into a settlement agreement with the agencies. And basically, I'd say from a measures standpoint, we did pretty well in comparison to them. And again, that the issues driving us would be our, frankly, probably the water quality cert, which FERC has said is deemed waived at this time. That could change. But the ESA consultation with NIMS, Fish and Wildlife Service, we've completed that. And the ESA consultation with NIMS was unique to us because of the lower Yuba River. And FERC said they wanted to hold off on that. Otherwise, we'd be ahead of PCWA, to tell you the truth. But we're not. I'd say the one place where, in terms of measures, they're better off than we are, and I'm doing some really broad brushes here. Recreation, we did not come to an agreement with the Forest Service on recreation facilities. So that is still up in the air, and that's something that's going to have to be fleshed out once the new license is issued, where PCWA reached agreement on a lot of the recreation facilities. So I think that's one area in particular where they're better off than we are, and I'd say the rest is, we're pretty much close on other things would be my assessment.
Thank you.
And the timing would probably be pretty close if it wasn't for the NIMS BA that is tied into the lower Yuba River.
Okay, so just kind of moving through some of what the changes are to our current procedure, the way we operate now, our operational procedures. We are looking at a new additional powerhouse at Rawlins Lake. There are FERC project boundary adjustments. There are 195 updated operating conditions, including modification of environmental measures, addition of environmental measures. There are 28 operational or resource plans that will need to be created and implemented. There are multiple studies that will need to be completed along the way. And then there are construction and modification of several of our facilities, some significant capital changes. As Jim alluded to, there are significant recreation expenses associated with the new license. And then there's some road work that will need to be done. This document, the total costs shown in this document over the 40 years, and that's what we need to stress here, is that some of the numbers you've been looking at are over the short term. They're 5-year, 7-year, 10-year capital expenses. This is total implementation cost over the 40 years of about $216 million, with an average annual cost of $2 to $4 million over the first 30 or so years. It was pointed out that Jim's memo, the HDR memo that was attached to the staff report, mentioned an attachment A that wasn't included in the staff report. That was an Excel file that doesn't translate well to a PDF staff report. We will work on getting that into a more presentable format. It's essentially the year-by-year total per measure that we expect to spend. So we'll work on bringing that back in a way that's a little bit more presentable, as opposed to a 40, 50, 60 column wide spreadsheet that really doesn't fit on a piece of paper. And so a little bit more, we'll go to the graph here. This kind of gives you an idea of, yes, sir.
So just quickly doing numbers in my head off of that last slide. Okay, so a huge number of $200 million. However, we are now making $20 million a year as a result of this process. My question, so 20 times 30 is $100 million. So this is a huge cost, but it comes out of this huge yearly revenue as well. I mean, the budgetary alignment. Right.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the importance here is to stress a couple of things. One, there are some significant capital expenses up front that we need to be war chesting money for. We need to have that money sitting there, so when we have to go out and build these things, we can. And we need to be cautious on our transfers out of hydro to support the water side of the house. It's money-wise. That money isn't going to be there when the new license comes in. That money will go towards the new license, and the water rates will need to absorb that loss. And so that's the reason that we're trying to make sure that this is front and center here, so we can have that conversation.
So back on that
Hey,
subject.
Keith,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
Keen, could I just add 2 things?
Yeah.
One, on the cost estimate that I developed, I took an assumption that each measure was a standalone measure, so when you add them all up, they add up. I didn't assume any synergies on approach to how you implement the measures. So there would be a cost savings there. How much I can't say for sure. It depends upon the approach. But I just wanted to point that out. And one other thing that I wanted to point out is that we did this over 40 years because FERC's default right now is to give a licensee a 40-year license unless there's a good reason to give them as low as 30 or as high as 50. Having just gone through relicensing and FERC being in a position where it may issue your license soon, you may want to consider filing a letter with FERC saying all the good things you've done, which FERC has now in the last 2 years. They've said that if someone gives them good reasons for longer than a 40-year license, they'd consider it. I would certainly encourage NID, considering everything you've just gone through and this slide, to request from FERC that when they issue you a license, it's for 50 years. But you need to do that proactively. If you don't do it, FERC may not consider everything, all the good things you've done. So, and you can see when you go out past 40 years, the costs tend to get lower, and they will get lower, and it won't add so much. But you don't want to go through relicensing again until you absolutely have to do it. And I think you've got a good chance of getting a 50-year license if you're proactive. So just wanted to mention that.
Excellent. Well,
a question on that, Jim. As Director Beerwagen, being new at this, do they have any longer than 50 years?
No, they don't. Statutorily, they can only give a new license between 30 and 50 years. FERC does not have the discretion to go longer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And I think kind of tying on to what Jim mentioned there in terms of the synergies and how we might be able to make some of these measures work together a bit more. Matt and I have been working on a business plan as to exactly how we're going to implement this thing. How many bodies do we need to do this? How many consultants are we going to need to bring on board? What specialties will those consultants have? What makes sense to hire inside of the district? What makes sense to send out? We're in the process of writing that document now and would expect it to be done later in the year. We're shooting for an August, September sort of time frame with that. So we should be able to fine tune these numbers a little bit and give you a staffing plan for how we expect to accomplish this thing moving forward. So
I was encouraged to hear what he just said about what do you call it, line item cost. And that's how you get to $216 million, right?
Yep.
But its very last line in the report says, I believe there are strategies that I can employ prior to license issuance or during license implementation to significantly reduce any of these costs to reduce the annual cash flow burden. So that's
Economy of scale.
The first number I hear is that shocking number, right? Then go, okay, and how many of those things are you talking about right now?
And that's what we're working on in the business plan, and that's why we've been doing. You'll notice in the budget for the past couple of years we've had pre-license implementation of FERC conditions. So we've been spending money on the historic properties management plan. There's some archaeological surveys that need to be done to determine what resources are out there, and so we've been doing some of that sort of stuff ahead of time. So that's in the works, and we're continuing to refine it as we go forward.
My other question, and this is what I thought if it's appropriate, I thought Scott was going to, what is the offset of generating power in a new power plant? How's that, what's the potential there?
And that's
the cost-benefit ratio of building a power plant, because that was a surprise to me that this was included in the relicensing.
That's That's a discussion I think we need to have in closed session. There are some contractual obligations, and there are some things that we need to talk about and how we use that strategy to the maximum.
So there's a strategy. I mean, there's a potential.
And on a volume basis, it would be like 15 million a year. We can't double our hydro, but it's somewhere north of 10 million a year. Be as much as 15 million a year, particularly if we were in this marketplace where we're making good money.
This on power generation. You're talking power generation on a new reservoir? Okay. New reservoir, new power plant.
I thought you were talking about, where a new reservoir, different new reservoir.
Yeah, there's
I was talking about the Centennial,
8 megawatts on the,
which is why I
On Rollins.
put it in.
Yeah.
I'll take Centennial all day
but no,
long.
I got you there.
But literally, I mean, that number would be
Yeah.
10, 15 million.
Yeah.
according to
That,
General manager's calculations of that.
but those discussions as to how we use the Rollins Powerhouse, what it means to our existing power purchase agreement, I'd like to have an attorney in the room as we discuss those. So,
40,000, yeah.
so, just moving through this couple of slides here that I prepared, you can see that this is the,
So, but to be clear, what were you asking, what,
I thought
since
you,
I misunderstood your question.
yeah, I thought when you talked about the revenue, you were referring to potential revenue from a power generator on roll.
No, I'm talking about our current 20 million a year, 23 million a year we make.
plus or minus.
Existing, 23 million. So as I say, so half of that's, yeah.
But you also mentioned this, to go back, which, because you brought up the reserves from Hydro, have been shown in the cost of service study that we would be tapping 6 million. Now, are you talking about above that, or would that be?
He's saying that needs to stop.
No, well, no, there is a transfer from Hydro that is sustainable, and it's probably in that $4 to $6 million range. It's right now. It was.
Don't have to leave.
It was.
I thought you were saying.
No, it doesn't go entirely. But now it's in the $10 to $11 million.
Oh, this last year, we tapped
$10.5 million from Hydro.
The proposal going forward is that it needs to stay, it can't go above.
It needs to shrink.
It needs to shrink.
So we can keep those reserves in place.
And rebuild the reserves that we've spent, and make sure we have the cash, and that we have the cash within the department to pay for these changed operations that are going to need to happen. So.
Good, I'm happy.
So this is just a picture of the memo, picture out of the memo, or a figure out of the memo, that shows a little bit about where the cash flow is going to go, and the timing of it. And we just want to point out that this is a truncated graph. It does go up to 22 million in that year, but it was just kind of unreadable once you threw it on that chart there. And then just the breakdown of where that money's going to be spent, and you can see the significant cost here is in the recreation side of the house. Very significant changes in recreation. So,
What's the grade?
on the right-hand side there, that's the recreation.
That's 55.
Oh, because all the roads and all that.
There's a lot of money tied up in that program there. And so, we hit these a little bit, right? So we're going to need to put aside some money in reserves to hit the higher years. We need to start working on our operational resource plans, or I shouldn't say start, continue working on the plans that we have been, and doing the things ahead of time that we need to do. We are also eyeing a potential reduction in power generation out of this. We are going to need to release more water, and that will have a negative impact on the generation out of the project, and possibly the revenues out of the project at that point. And then we need to just talk about these spending and reserve practices that we've been doing over the last couple of years.
Do you anticipate those two items to be in your business plan you're talking about?
In terms of the reduction and, yeah.
The loss of the water and the loss of the revenue from power.
We can certainly talk about that, yeah. Yep.
And that loss of water is the 45,000 acre feet in an extremely dry year.
I don't have that.
Between here and there is.
It ranges from 15,000 acre feet all the way up to 60, and it's
Oh,
extremely wet.
50,
I'm
yeah.
done.
Extreme, okay.
All right, and so
That's what you're talking about, that loss to all concerns, environment. It is real, and we know it's coming, and we need to do a business plan and/or build a reservoir to help.
And so that concludes my presentation. There is no action to be taken with this item. This is simply an informational item that we wanted to bring forward to the committee, so I will open it to any questions or concerns you have, and we can go from there.
Well, you got a nice email about your concerns on that first item.
Just thank you.
Very nice, thank you.
Okay.
So three things caught my attention more than normal. One you already answered about the power plant, additional power plant. this 193, 192, or whatever the number is, bullet points, right? Actions
Yeah.
to be taken. How does this, first of all, how does this compare both action-wise and dollars-wise to our first license that expired? Okay, so 1964, what, do we know what we paid 50 years to, as a comparison, just to get the mind around this, the magnitude, this just seems a very heavy lift, okay?
Yeah, I don't have that number.
What are you asking, the cost of the infrastructure? What are you asking?
No, what did our license cost in 1964?
Yeah, if we had done this same assessment in 1964, what would the number have been?
Well, what was the number that day, right? And I know it's not, it's only germane to, comparing, you know, the heavy lift, because my gut feeling says this is an extremely heavy lift, and I was shocked at the 119,000 for recreation facilities. Who developed those? Where did it come from? How did they get in here?
Kean?
Yeah.
Kean, I might be able to add a little insight into that.
Okay.
And this is a nuance, and I'll focus on the recreation. I can't answer your initial question, but keep in mind when you did your initial license, things like the Environmental Protection Act, the Clean Water Act, things like that weren't in place. And the Forest Service did not have mandatory conditioning authority at that time. So things have certainly changed since your initial license. But with regards to the cost, recall that the recreation costs are so high because we included continuing to manage your existing recreation facilities with any upgrades that would be required under the new license. Because we wanted to have an entire cost for that, not an incremental cost. So if you recall, the recreation, that 51% I think it is, probably 47% of that is, and I'm just guessing it'd be at least that high. If you had the exact same recreation facilities you had today, you'd still be expending that cost because a lot of your recreation facilities are old and need to be upgraded. So the cost for any additional recreation is relatively low. It's a cost going forward over 40 years of replacing very old facilities and maintaining them. So that's the one that I want to point out. That's the big cost in there, that it's a going forward cost. So if you had the exact same recreation facilities you had today, and it just said maintain and operate them, you'd be spending about 47% of that cost going the next 40 years.
Okay, that's extremely helpful. Thank you.
And on the infrastructure itself,
Yes.
if you look at what was built, it was somewhere between 17. I think the cost of this facility in 1968 was $64 million. The replacement cost today would be $654 million. Just the infrastructure. Did it 64 minutes? Now, if we were to do it all over again, it would be 650. So huge. That's just the infrastructure, not the license. Yeah.
Hey, Jim, this is Greg. Can you give a background for the members on since 2011-12, what the public input has been on these components of the licensure? So the number of meetings that has been in place, how much we've been in discussion with both regulatory agencies and the public?
Sure, and when you say since 2012, you mean when we started the relicensing?
Yeah.
Sure, be happy to. I'll say, just as background, the default relicensing process with FERC is called the integrated licensing process, which is what we used. The integrated licensing process requires 4 meetings with agencies. That's it. That's what's required by regulations. California is used to a lot more than that. For the NID relicensing, we probably had anywhere between 120 and 150 meetings with agencies. And the real push on that was because, number one, the agencies have tremendous discretion over what studies you do. And in relicensing, studies cost usually is somewhere between 40 and 60% of the entire relicensing cost. So we spent a lot of time pushing back and negotiating as low as we could. And then the second push with the measures were coming up with agreement on measures, and they focused primarily on flows. And we ended up in an agreement with the Forest Service, the big agency, on all the flow requirements. Were they as low as we could possibly go? Probably not. Were they as low as we could negotiate with health without having the Forest Service come back and double them? Definitely. Yeah, we ended up lower than we would have otherwise. So since then, the Forest Service on 4E conditions, your measures on flows and Forest Service conditions, except for recreation, I think match up. So you got certainty and surety from all those meetings with the big player, and with the water quality cert potentially out of the way, your surety and certainty is much higher than it would have been. Does that answer your question, Greg?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So see no other questions or comments, we'll open it to the public comment. Reminder, it's start, okay.
Okay, John Norton, it looks like you're first up for the public comment, and you've been unmuted.
Yes, I have two questions. The first one, what are the current reserves for the FERC license? And the second question is, can we delay Rollins #2 Powerhouse?
So regarding the first question, I don't know what the current reserves are. Greg, do you happen to know off the top of your head?
No, I don't have that.
Okay, we can get that information. And regarding delaying the Rollins Powerhouse, possibly, but that may have very significant financial ramifications regarding the power sales under the Yuba-Bear contract. So
I think that's in here.
yeah, we need that powerhouse to generate.
So is there a document available that shows the pluses, the pros and cons on that?
On the Rollins Powerhouse?
Correct.
Not in that way, but it's something that we can look into and present. We can talk about that in the business plan. If this, then that.
If we forego the capital, what's the loss in revenue?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So that's
I'd be very interested in that.
that's certainly something we can contemplate in the business plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Do we have any others?
Star 9.
Or raise your hand. Okay, Tracy Sheehan is next up, and you've been unmuted.
Ken, I'll drop out. There's nothing else.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you, and Jim, please stay online until we're done with the presentation, until we're done with this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought there were no more questions. Certainly, happy to, of course.
Yeah, no, Tracy, go ahead. You're up next.
Oh, great. Can everyone hear me?
You can.
Oh, good. Good morning, everyone. Tracy Sheehan, Foothills Water Network. As many of you might know, the network was founded because our focus was relicensing, not only the Yuba-Bear project, but the Middle Fork project, and of course the YRDP project. So I did not work on all these projects. My predecessor did, Julie Lineback, as well as other network members. But I wanted to give comment to say that we look forward to more presentations like this. And this was extremely helpful. So thank you very much. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it, both in terms of summarizing all the years of work that went into this and all the money. So we look forward to partnering with NID on license implementation. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Are there any other comments?
No.
All right, so seeing none, we'll move off of this item. And now, Jim, you can jump off the phone. Thank you. Thank you for calling in. We
Thank you,
appreciate
Jim.
having you online.
My pleasure, and thank you again. Bye now.
Bye.
All right, so we'll move on to item number 7, which is the hydroelectric development activities update.
couldn't even, next time we got to schedule me a break in here so you don't have to listen to me the entire time, so, yeah.
Well, we could take item 8 out of order.
This is fine, I'll move through this relatively quickly, so, yeah. No, this is pretty straightforward, so, we'll start with our, we'll let the Zoom meeting catch up. We'll start with our outage report. So beginning at the end of the month, this is our May outage report. Again, even though these meetings fall so late in June, or the following month, we're a little bit behind in what we're reporting out here. So we began our Bowman outage on May 31st. We've actually successfully completed that outage at this point. That's our annual scheduled outage that doesn't impact our revenues. Unfortunately, this year we did find some issues that caused us to go a little bit long on that outage, so there will be some revenue impacts. I'll be able to quantify that next month during our update. Rest of the month was pretty darn good. Chicago Park and Dutch Flat number 2, there was a disturbance on the 115 kV line out there that caused our powerhouses to trip off a line. That does not impact our revenues, given our contract. That's a transmission issue that we still get paid for. We also saw some significant disturbances in the 12 kV system out there that caused our powerhouses to trip offline, the smaller powerhouses at Scotts Flat, Combie North, and Combie South. Those do impact our revenues, so we'll see how that shakes out. They were all dealt with reasonably quickly, though. You'll see our operators, even though that the one... Hour and 54, and that the one that occurred at midnight, getting all 4 of those units back online within the 2 hours is pretty darn good in my opinion. That's waking a guy out of bed, getting him out the door, getting him to the powerhouses, getting everything restored and back online. So that's a reasonable turnaround for a middle of the night phone call. So I'm definitely happy with that. Again, we'll keep flashing up the key performance indicators. This is one of those that as more data comes in, it'll be useful to see how we're doing. You can see we continue to make our
simple was it fixed? Was it a relay that just needed to be reset?
Typically it's PG&E does something, and it's
not a swirl or a hurricane, a surge in the system.
I'm somewhat suspicious of the one that occurred on midnight that night. It occurred at exactly midnight. That seems to me that PG&E pushed some update out into their system. Something happened. The lights flickered. It was enough for our protection to see something's going on out there. We need to separate and do what it does. But I'm suspicious of that one, and you'll never get actual data on what happened.
You just have to drive out there and actually flip the switch?
Our procedure is that when that occurs, when we get certain relays that come in, we will go out and take a look at it and make sure that, depending on which way it separates, if at the larger powerhouses we have equipment that can detect a line disturbance, step our equipment off, it'll sit there and idle. And then when it detects that the line is good again, it'll automatically reclose back into it. The smaller powerhouses don't have that. It's just not cost effective at those. So we send an operator out. He'll go out and turn it on and restart everything. So
nothing was found with it?
Nothing was. Yeah, that's when the disturbances are on the transmission and distribution lines. We never get any feedback about it other than something happened. And it can be as simple as, when you're sitting at your house and the lights flicker a little bit, that could be enough for us to step back and protect our equipment. Yep. So, yeah. You can see we continue to make our weekly dam inspections, and I do want to highlight that we are making our monthly inspections every single time. It's just the weekly inspections that we do less of. Again, we're out inspecting our linear facilities. We did fairly well. This is all of our power lines. It's all of our flumes and canals, including the South Yuba Canal. We have been trying to make sure we're out there on the South Yuba Canal watching that and patrolling it as necessary, just to make sure that we have the operational capability and we've got that all figured out. We continue to prioritize getting into the powerhouses every day. It is important to get in there. You can have all of the sensing equipment and all the monitoring, but we haven't figured out how to smell when something goes wrong remotely yet. There is just that the operator goes in there and he can smell when it's wrong. And yeah, you can feel when it's wrong, when it's the water's cavitating a little bit differently. There's just no substitute yet for having a human body inside the powerhouse to pick up what's going wrong. And so we prioritize that highly, and I think that shows in the data there. So some of our key activities on the maintenance side of the house, again, we're preparing for the Bowman outage. We installed a new digital governor at the Bowman Powerhouse, which is a big step for us. This is what controls the unit, brings it up to speed, and then parallels it and controls the power output. So it's a significant upgrade for us. We've gone from a mechanical system to a new electronic sort of governor out there, computer-based. And then we did some aggressive testing out there to support the new insurance requirements. That is something that I don't want to steal Greg's thunder from next week, but as we move into this new world of insurance, there is going to be more testing required, more third-party testing required, and so we took the first steps out there at Bowman and tested our transformer out there, and the good news is that the transformer tested in good condition. Every test came back good, so we're happy to see that. We're also spent a significant amount of time working to implement the remote operations of the Combie South Powerhouse. Again, we're trying to get it, what we really want, the goal we want out there is to have NCPA be able to turn those units off remotely. If they can do that, it'll save us operator time, significant operator time. We're not comfortable turning them on remotely yet until we deal with some of these operational issues, but we'll get there. We repaired a problem on our Dutch Flat number 2 transformer cooling fan, and this is something that I'm watching. As you'll see when the capital plan comes across to you, we have replacement of the Chicago Park Dutch Flat and then Deer Creek, assuming we take that over in a reasonable time frame, transformers. We're starting to see problems with the cooling fans. We're starting to see that these things are nearing their end of life. Although all the tests keep coming back positive, the useful life on a transformer is 50 years, and that's where we are. So we need to start budgeting for that and making sure that those processes happen. We also repaired the gates at the Scotts Flat Dam. The public has gone a bit crazy as a result of the COVID-19 thing and being cooped up, and we are seeing that. Somebody physically broke off one of the locks out there, and we had to go do some welding out there, and it's been a significant amount of time that we've spent trying to keep order out there as the recreation facilities are closed. And so we're seeing that. That's the incorrect powerhouse there. So we finished installing the new jumpers and the capacitor bank at Combie North. That's been a problem that's been plaguing us for a while. We think we've got that under control. We started working on the Dutch Flat number 2 programmable logic controller project. The board approved the contract, the APC approved the contract to purchase the equipment out there. This will significantly help us automate the powerhouses, and then it will also help us monitor the powerhouses. This comes with an improved vibration monitoring system out there. It'll be key to the insurance folks that they can see that, hey, these powerhouses aren't vibrating, they are consistently performing this way, and it'll help us with our preventative maintenance quite a bit. We did some work on a fabrication and installation of a new gauging station on the Bowman-Spalding Canal, our operations side of the house. The Hydro Operations has been screaming for some better visibility on the Bowman-Spalding Canal during the winter. We'll now have a checkpoint where we can see that the water is moving its way down the system. This is the first of 2 that we're going to add to the Bowman-Spalding Canal, so it'll be significant for our winter operations. And then we've identified a fuel theft problem at our Bear Valley house, and so that is now under a cover. And so the thieves they're very brave. Daylight hours, we've caught them coming up with a fuel tank and siphoning gas out of the tanks and running away with it. And so we've dealt with that issue at this point, but we had to go build a shed over the top of the tanks out there. One of the other things that I wanted to highlight is that we have completed the fire protection buffer around the Chicago Park Powerhouse. This is just a picture of the powerhouse looking up the hill. We've done a significant amount of clearing on the hillside here away from our high voltage bus work, and then our high voltage transformers just in the back of the picture there. So this is a significant improvement to our fire protection out there. And then we also dealt with the actuator at the low-level outlet at Jackson Meadows. We had shown a project several years out for the potential to replace the low-level outlet valve at Jackson Meadows. Fixing the actuator out there means that that project comes off the table. So that might not have made your radar yet, but it makes me feel a whole lot better that we don't have to replace that outlet valve out there.
The actuator is the device that turns the valve?
That closes the valve, and in this case, it's the one that closes it automatically should the penstock rupture. And so we were having some problems with it, but it's been dealt with, and we sent it down to the folks at Unico, and it's beautiful technology. It's all spring-based, it's all pressure-based. There is not a 100% mechanical, not a computer control in the thing, and now it works flawlessly. It's really kind of fun. Highlighting a couple of the things that the administration, compliance, dam safety side of the house has been working on. This is the CalISO modeling that I alluded to in the NERC presentation. We have responded to the Chicago Park modeling request, and that has been an absolute process to get that data together. Since that time, CalISO has said, well, that's good data. We want to provide it for Dutch Flat, Chicago Park, Rollins, Bowman, and Combie South. So this is not an insignificant amount of work. You're going to see some consulting dollars for this in 2021. So just be aware of that. And we have requested that from the company that does that work for us. And then we finalized the physical modeling plan for the Scotts Flat Spillway Repair Project. We spoke to the engineering committee last month about some changes that we need to do out there, and we believe that commissioning and building this physical model for the Scotts Flat Spillway will save us millions of dollars as we move forward with the construction. It's just really necessary to do this as a part of the design out there. So we have submitted that physical modeling plan to FERC and the Division of Safety of Dams, and we're waiting on their response. And then I just wanted to leave this with the committee. We did also receive our fee statement from the Department of Water Resources Division of Safety of Dams. And as you can see, the annual dam fees are up to, I think it was $438,000. So they have more than doubled over the last couple of years. And these are expenses that are completely external to us. You just get to pay them. I just wanted to highlight how quickly those are changing and how significantly they're changing. Maybe we're seeing them level off, but I'm not there yet. So, and that concludes my report. So,
you want me to pull it up for you?
Sure, please.
Yeah.
Okay, item 7, item 8, operations department.
Oh, it's,
Don't generally do
Okay.
about activities report.
Okay.
So I'll read through this one here rather quickly. We'll let the next back up here. Okay, so here we go. We'll start off with our Bowman Lake precipitation totals. As you can see, we are now at 48.72 inches of precipitation, which is 71% of average for this time of year. Every week or every month, I come to this committee and say we're pretty much done with the rain, and this time I feel pretty comfortable with it. I said that last month, but we got a little shot in the arm there. But either way, we're going to end up well below average.
2014.
We're right on track with 2014, 2015.
4-year, was it 3-year drought, 4-year drought?
It's right in the middle of the 3-year drought.
Second year of a 3-year drought.
Okay. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that next winter provides us a
And
little bit
last
better.
year was our robust year?
Last
18,
year-
19, 20, which one? So 18, 19 was last year, and we had a robust year.
Correct. That's purple,
The green.
The green line, yes. That was the big snarl date. So the kind of the bad news is that the 8 to 14 day outlook
temperature-wise, shows that we're gonna be above average and it's gonna be rather warm. Shocking, I mean, we are on the cusp of summer here, so that's not super unusual. And then the rainfall, they predict in the next 8 to 14 days, we have a little bit better than average chance of getting a little bit of rain, but during this time of year, what does that mean? I think it's a sprinkle. It's not gonna be anything too measurable.
Thunderstorm.
As we have seen in the last week, right? We had some clouds blow over and we got a drop or two. It wasn't much. The good news is the California Drought Monitor really hasn't changed much. This is from May. If you go to the next slide, you can see that it really doesn't change into June. So that's the good news. If anything, the northern part of California actually improved, which is kind of odd. The next slide, the good news. I like to focus on the good news. Our water resources crew has done a marvelous job in managing our water in a very dry year. And you can see we are at 261,301 acre feet, which is 97% of capacity and 109% of where we are normally on average this time of year. So looking very good in that regard. And that does track along with what our forecast was. We do anticipate ending the year with above average carryover, which is great. We're setting ourselves up in case next year ends up dry as well, which is very prudent. Now, as far as our treated water use, our customers in the month of May used 17% less water as compared to 2013. That puts us year to date at 12% of conservation as compared to 2013. The interesting thing about this slide, I'll point it out real quick, is that in 2019, it's rather hard to see on this overhead projector. Hopefully the Zoom folks can see it better, but the kind of the orange line there is 2019. If you follow that line, you can see every month this year we have been well over what last year's totals were. And that I would like to contribute to the whole shelter at home, stay at home thing. People are using more water when they're at home as opposed to going to work either at locations that aren't served by NID or they're just using more water within their own households. And that seems to be reflected in these graphs. But the good news is overall, compared to 2013, the benchmark, we are still conservative. All right, so now we get to our activities. The distribution crews have had their hands full with algae this year. It has taken off early. Our aquatics applications help, but they have not been cutting it. So we've had to have crews out there manually, our maintenance crews have been out there manually cleaning these canals, and it's been an issue, but we're tackling it the best we can. This is really focused in that Placer County area at this point in time. As temperatures warm up, I'm sure it will move up the hill. We have divers today in Lower Scotts Flat. They're fixing the gate that broke in the middle of the last winter, so that's good news. We had a major main line break on East Main Street, took out our line. It was a high pressure transmission main. So not only did it take out our transmission main, but it also took out PG&E gas line. So that was a very interesting outage. Fortunately, we were able to manipulate the system, and we really only have one customer out of water for any extended period of time. We were then able to call crews in and schedule a nighttime outage later that next day. And our maintenance crews did a great job working through the night and getting that put back in service by 5 a.m. the next morning. So kudos to them. They did a great job. And then Caltrans crews down there on Highway 20, they relocated our farm canal, which was challenging at best because we pumped our canal waters around their work site. We had some concerns on how that would go, but I'm happy to report the work is done and didn't hear of too many complaints, so that's good news. Our treated water crews produced 282 million gallons of water for the month of May. They're continuing their sampling. I don't know if you were aware, but we increased the sampling along the canal systems during the whole shelter-in-place episode because folks were utilizing our canals for recreation. Lots of walking going on, people actually trying to jump in the canal, which we've had to visit a few sites and ask them to get out of the canal. It's not safe. But the E. coli and coliform sampling we've been doing along those canals have shown that there's really not a marked change in the water quality with the activities going on. So that's kind of the good news. We'll keep watching it, see where it goes from there. also working on our annual consumer confidence report. It should be out in the next week or so, and then we'll be putting that reminder in all the billings going out to our treated water customers. We're completing our State Water Resources Control Board system reports. This is all the treated water systems. Every year we have to answer a multi-page report about what we do, what we did, how many customers we served. It's just a who's who about your system, and every year we have to jump through those hoops. Our campground systems are starting up, and that includes the water systems and sampling. Every year we have to do a sampling plan and submit it to the county health department as we fire those systems up, so we have completed that. And we have posted another water treatment position. We've gone through a lot of operators in the last 2 years. It's very strange. Water treatment's usually one of those areas where somebody begins in that position and retires in that position, but lately it's been a revolving door. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm hoping it slows down. And then we have developed a contract for removal of the last lime silo system. I'm sure that would make Ram happy if he was still here. Okay, water resources, water rights. We are still in contact with State Water Resources Control Board regarding our fee. What's the right term I'm looking for? A dispute. We haven't got an answer back yet, and it's a very substantial amount of money, so we're going to continue to pursue that. We are cross-training our hydrographers, so the hydro folks have been coming down here, and we've been going up there, and I just think it makes good sense to have our hydrographers know the entire footprint of the district. So thank you to the hydro crews for helping out and supporting that effort. We have sent our last PG settlement bill to them. We anticipate we'll get paid for this last one. It's the ones that happened during the bankruptcy that are still in limbo. We've been told to expect some payment from that, but it just may take some time. And then we're updating our crop reports. Our customer service team, we're up to over 6,000 folks that are utilizing our online bill payment options. We have now opened our lobby, and we're operating under limited hours. This will allow our team to go in there in the afternoon and disinfect everything. We've also set the spacing on the floor, and we're only allowing 2 people in the lobby at once, all due to the COVID situation. And then a little note there, the COVID fee forgiveness. As you remember, we have basically said that we're going to forgive all late fees and not do any shut-offs during the COVID event. All told, we're figuring that's costing us about $1,500 a week in late fees. Our electrical crew, they have retrofitted our turbidity meters. The good news is the new meters are very accurate, and the result of that has made our readings from our treatment plant actually cleaner than what the old meters had. That's always good. Sometimes the change in technology makes those numbers worse, and actually turns out our water is even better than we thought it was, so that's great. We switched our SCADA systems to the fiber optic network, and this is through AT&T as opposed to Verizon now, and we're hopeful that's a more robust system during the coming PSPS event. AT&T has promised us they will be putting out generators this time around, and so we will see.
Let's see about that one.
We've done oil analysis on our Mag 3 pumps, and it has returned bad results, so we have ordered replacement pumps out for that location. What's that?
I remember them being replaced under Ron Nelson.
I'll get you the date, but it's been a while. And we're not replacing the entire pump, it's just the electric motor part of it. Oh, yeah. And then we're replacing or installing a high volume pump on the Dark Horse system. In the past, it's been 2 very small pumps, and it takes forever to fill that tank. We're putting a high volume pump in the 3rd hole. It's always had 3 holes in there, 2 small pumps and a future pump. Well, we're going to fill that future pump, one that will pump out some volume and protect us for fire season.
The future is now.
The future is now. Okay. The long ravine pressure system's up and running, and then our electrical crews are pursuing the purchase of copper leads for our new portable generators, which is also good news for the coming PSPS. Our KPIs, nothing.
Copper leads.
So wherever we have these portable generators, we have to have the copper lines to connect to the generator and then over to the transfer switches into our facility. That's the copper lines. And they're very substantial.
Is there-
down, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there's lugs on our facilities where we connect our portable generators to, and then to connect the portable generator to those lugs, we need the copper lines to connect.
They can be fairly expensive.
They're
This
very
is-
expensive, very large lines.
Yeah.
And they're big, right? Yeah.
This is not the Romex.
Diameter.
Yeah.
And not, how do we, so you haven't had them out there for theft and harvesting purposes?
Yeah, no, we keep them here at the headquarters.
Well, they come with the generator then?
They do not, and that's.
No, I mean, in our.
They travel with the generator,
They
yeah.
travel with the generator, not be out there in place and somebody would rip it up.
Yeah, these lines are so big, we roll them up, store them on pallets, so you can get the forklift under them and load them into a truck if you're going out to one of these sites. It's not small stuff. Keep KPIs, so new treated water accounts, we had a whopping 3 for the month of May. New raw water sales actually kind of picked up, which is good news, but although not unusual as you look at years past. So we continue to track right in line. Raw water sales changes. I know we talked about this last month, and it was very weird that we were going negative. And there were some concerns about the pricing and whatnot, and I totally get it. However, in the month of May, we picked back up again, and people are now ordering water. Treated water outages, very minimal. We had 6 for the, oh, excuse me, this one hasn't been updated. I apologize. I'll get you an update on that. It was 0? There you go.
Yeah.
So, as you
Easy update.
remember, during the COVID event, we tried to stop all outages so folks could continue their hand washing and disinfecting at their homes. And so, that's why that's 0, but it's gonna jump up again in June because we have started with a vengeance here. Emergency treated water outages, we had 2. And then scheduled raw water outages, we're in that time of year where we just don't really do these. We don't want to interrupt water service. And then same with emergency raw water outages. And last but not least is the amount of calls coming into the office. Again, very high, but seems to track with years past. We had 4,114 calls coming into the office all told, and we had 198 emails into the office. So very busy there. Any questions on any of that? Slides. Good. Okay. Seeing none, we will close item 8, and just a notification that the committee's going to take a brief recess, and then we're going to reconvene in closed session. There's no anticipated action that's required to be reported by the Brown Act, so this will conclude today's meeting for those folks. Thank you for participating.